Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Governor's Summit on Early Language and Literacy session on the basics strategy. What none of us can do alone, all of us can do together. I am Cheryl Cooper Smith, and I am the program manager at the Deal Center. I will be assisting our presenter for today's session. Here are just a few things to keep in mind as we get started. We encourage you to use the chat box to ask questions and share comments. Any burning questions for the presenter, we will address throughout the session. If time allows, we will also take a few of those questions for the presenter at the end of the session. In the chat box, please feel free to share your organization that you represent and the role that you are in that agency or organization. As you're listening today, if you would like to get more information, please feel free to also share your email. Participant handouts for the presentation will be made available after the session. So please check back later on today or tomorrow when the session viewing is on demand. If you have technical questions, please use the drop-down menu in the chat box to send information to me directly, and I will address any of your questions as quickly as possible. We will remain muted throughout the session. So now, I am so honored to welcome our presenter, Dr. Ron Ferguson. Dr. Ferguson is the president and CEO of the Basics, Inc. He is also an adjunct lecturer at the Harvard Kennedy School. Dr. Ferguson will tell us about the basic strategy for engaging whole communities. Welcome, Dr. Ferguson. Dr. Ferguson, I am going to stop sharing so that you can begin to share.
All right. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good to be here. Good to see Grace on the screen. Other folks, I really do appreciate or enjoy being able to see who I'm talking to. So if you're presentable, don't mind turning your camera on. That would be appreciated. Otherwise, still great to be here to talk with you. I am going to share my screen to get started. The work that I'm talking about today, the basics, comes off really of a conference that we hosted about 10 years ago where the emphasis shifted to be on the importance of parenting and caregiving during those first few years. I was not aware until about 10 years ago of the importance of those first 3, 4, 5 years of life. There's a ton of brain development that happens during that period, and it's very responsive to children's lived experiences in their homes and with whatever caregivers they're with during that period. And so we decided to try to create something that would be more than just another boutique program where it works for 25 kids in one time and place, because there are programs that do that. There's evidence that they work. But the challenge is to go to scale, is to affect entire communities. And that's what we try to do by designing the basics approach. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to shift to begin to share my screen. And there. And then I need to take just a second to spread the pictures out again. Here. So title, Basic Strategy, What None of Us Can Do Alone, All of Us Can Do Together. And it's about intentionality. I figured I'd start out by just reminding us that generations come and go, and we're all part of this grand flow of history. The picture on the right there is me and my father when I was 2 years old. And then that's me and my son when he was 2 years old, right? And so the challenge is during those early years of life to really get that work done. This is my grandmother on her 100th birthday. She was the inspiration for the entire family. Yeah, no, but not for her, I wouldn't be sitting here today. But she was a master teacher. And we used to go to visit her her special education classes would put on performances for the whole school that we'd go to visit every year. This poem, passing the torch, my flesh is weak, my soul is tired, I pass the torch to you. Inside this flame live many dreams, now you must see them through. And most of us are living somebody else's dreams, somebody who inspired us and whose work we're carrying on. This is my mother and my granddaughter. I had kids late. My son had kids late. So that's my first granddaughter. That's about 3 or 4 weeks ago. My mother's 92nd birthday was yesterday. And so again, these images of just generations. So now we're going to talk mostly today about early childhood, but I want to emphasize there are no throwaway ages. We're talking about developing fully realized human beings. So to put this all in context, those early years, as I mentioned, there's a ton of brain development. But then 3 to 5, there's still a lot of brain development, but kids are starting to get their preschool skills, get along with other kids, know some basic facts and skills. 5 to 9, learning to read, learning to do math so that later they can use those skills for doing other topics. 9 to 14, developing a sense of identity. How do I connect? How do I fit in with other kids? 14 to 18, thinking about what do I want to be when I grow up and what implications does that have, or what courses I might need to take in high school, what passion projects I might need to adopt. 18 to 22, actually making the transition into adulthood. 22 to 30, getting your feet firmly planted as a young adult. There are no throwaway periods. There is developmental work to do during each of those periods. And if we don't get it done during each of those periods, there's a price to pay later. We can work hard, we can make up a lot of it, but it's best if we try to get it done the right way the first time through. For each of these ages, make sure the young people have the experiences, the supports that are going to give them the foundations that they need for the next step in life. So the basics are about starting at birth or even prenatal. We can start having conversations about these issues with people before their children are born. I'm going to start with a little video here about brain architecture and the development of the infant brain. Let's see if this will start playing. Wait. There it is.
Child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Okay, so 80%, the brain is 80% of its adult size by the time kids are 3 years old. But maybe even more interesting than that, it's 70% of its adult size by the time they're 1 year old. It actually doubles in size during the first year of life. And then by the time they're 5 years old, it's about 90%. Now, obviously, those percentages will vary a little bit from kid to kid, from child to child, but there's a ton of brain development during this period. and it's very sensitive to kids' lived experiences. It's very sensitive to the brain architecture, we say, is sensitive to the environment, and particularly the back and forth interactions with caregivers. If you're on this call, you're already a little bit in early childhood, and so you probably know about serve and return as an idea, the importance of that back and forth interaction between children and their caregivers. And repeated use of those brain circuits is important. Just like a muscle, the more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. And the analog between the brain and the muscle is not a bad analog. And there's a use it or lose it dynamic. And so the brain pathways that we use a lot tend to thicken up and persist, and those that don't get used much at all tend to wither away and get pruned, as if we were pruning a bush where the branches some were strong, some were weak, and we kind of prune out the weak ones to send the energy into the stronger ones. Same thing happens with the brain. And so that early brain architecture is the foundation for all thinking and learning that comes after that. And the objective here is to retain as much of that inborn potential as we can. This image is 4 slices of brain tissue, 4 cross sections of brain tissue. And we see here, if you look at the 2-year-old slice, notice that it's a bit more dense than the adult slice. Again, it's that use it or lose it. If you look at the adult slice, you'll see some places that look like broken threads. Those are the connections that have been pruned away. You also see a number of darker, heavier, thicker nodes and pathways, the ones that get used a lot. So again, the more interaction, the more support, the more back and forth serve and return interactions our kids have when they're infants and toddlers and even preschoolers and early elementary kids, the more of that network, that network potential that we see it for 2-year-olds will have been retained into adulthood. The differences between kids from different backgrounds are actually somewhat detectable by the time they're 6 or 7 months. And the research has linked those to the environment that kids are in. But by the time they're 2 years old, it's pretty stark. So here, for example, here we're looking at cognitive skills for kids whose parents have different levels of education. You see it goes from graduate education all the way down to less than a high school, as we go from left to right, from the teal all the way over to the orange. And here, these are skills that you can detect by interacting with an infant, a 9 to 12-month-old. They explore objects, they explore purposefully, they jabber expressively. And you see for jabbering expressively, you do get some differences here, even when children are only 9 to 12 months old, where children whose parents have less than high school are a bit less chatty than others. And we know that parents who have less education do tend to have less active conversation at home. That's just a fact on average, not particular for any particular family necessarily, but on average, we see these. But what grabbed my attention about 10 years ago was this. By the time kids are 2 years old, this is what the differences look like. And I want to suggest to you that I think a lot of that's avoidable. If we help parents understand the importance of interacting with their children and doing what we have boiled down to be the basics principles and practices, in other words, doing practices that align with those principles we're talking about. If we look at what's on the axis here, you got receptive vocabulary is how much kids understand of what people say to them. Expressive vocabulary is what they can express, what they can say. Listening comprehension is whether they understand what's being communicated, the idea. And matching discrimination is whether they can match up similar objects and distinguish things that are different from one another. Those are huge differences. Okay. And here, at the top line, the 1.0 line at the top is the performance level of children whose parents have advanced degrees. And the height of each bar is the ratio of that group to the group whose parents have advanced degrees. So we come all the way over to the far side here. Children whose parents have less than high school are half as likely. Their scores on matching discriminations is only half of the parents whose parents have graduate degrees. Okay, that's why we're here, because we can do something about that. And we find these early gaps in the normal course of life as we normally conduct it, they just grow over time. This is not even half the way to kindergarten by 24 months. You can imagine what's happening in those kindergarten classes when those gaps have continued to expand. That's a problem we're trying to address here. This is an image of a study that was conducted in California. On the screen, you'll see a book and a dog. And then there's a mother with a child in her lap. She's got on dark glasses, so she can't see anything, and she's got on sound mufflers, so she can't hear. And what they do in this experiment is they name one of the objects and they track how long it takes the child to look at the object that's been named. Before they start the project, they make sure the child knows, can identify each of the objects that's going to be named. So the variation in how long it took them to look at the thing is not because they didn't know what it was. But the child has to hear the word book, associate it, think, okay, a book, and then they associate it with what's on the screen and they look at the screen. That language processing speed, there's a 6-month gap between the speed of the most advantaged and least advantaged children that they had in that study. A 6-month gap in language processing speed by 2-year-olds, by the time kids are 2 years old. Okay, imagine a kindergarten classroom where the teacher is speaking to the class, she's tracking, watching to see, I can see 5 of you, I wish I could see more of you. If I can watch your faces and kind of see if you're kind of following along with me. And if most of the class seems to be following along, there may be a few kids who are still trying to figure out what the teacher meant by what she said 30 seconds ago. Okay, because their language processing speed is not as great as the rest of the class. And so this is not just of intellectual curiosity. We're talking about things that affect real life courses here. The one study for the Brookings Institution found that by the time kids are 11 years old, which is about 5th grade, they're still on track with basic reading and math skills if they were kindergarten ready. The ones who are not kindergarten ready, only about 45% are still on track with reading and math skills by the time they get to 5th grade. Right, so just another indication that where we start matters. We talked about starting at time 2, at 2 years old. We see 45, well, some kids are kindergarten ready, some aren't. And that has implications all the way up until 5th grade. And we can track it all the way up into adulthood and through life. So we're talking about trying to be collectively intentional. We're trying to get parents to be individually intentional. Once you know it really matters, that you use these ideas, that you follow these practices, that you interact with your kids in particular ways, you're likely to be a bit more intentional about it, to get it scheduled into your routines. Similarly, as entire communities, once we know these things really matter, we can be more intentional as entire communities. So collective intentionality, the title of the talk, what none of us can do alone, all of us can do together, is the idea. Now, the basics 5 principles. Maximize love, manage stress is the first of the 5 principles. Let me say a little bit about each of them as I go through them. The fact is that the sense of emotional security that children have in early childhood affects the development of what are called executive function skills. Executive function skills are self-regulation skills, self-management, self-control skills. So things like the ability to make a plan and follow through with it, the ability to resist temptation, the ability to shift attention from one thing to another thing. And you recognize those are all skills that really matter when you're trying to learn in groups, or even learn by yourself, but learn in groups with other people, like in a classroom. And so we wonder why some kids, when they get to early elementary school, can't quite focus, they can't quite sit still. Some of that's executive function skills. And if children are in topsy-turvy environments, are in a fight or flight mode, frame of mind, a lot of the time, they don't develop executive function skills as well as children who are who are shielded from a lot of that early stress. And so when we talk about maximize love, manage stress, we're talking about both the parent stress and the child stress. The more the parent is able to manage their stress, the more they can be emotionally present for their child. And again, the more the child is shielded from stress, the stronger are the executive function skills that they develop. And so when we talk about communities engaging to follow the basics principles, we're talking about helping parents and caregivers to expand their own repertoire of mindfulness and self-management and relaxation and stress management skills, but also to understand that it matters that their children don't experience a lot of that too. And so they can be more personal, more purposeful, more intentional about helping to manage that aspect of things. The second of the principles is talk, sing, and point. Turns out that babies can hear at least 3 months before they're born. So they come out of the womb already having started to encode language. So we want to talk real talk, not gibberish or baby talk. Obviously you can't resist talking baby talk some. Okay, my granddaughter was born in December, and I will admit I talk gibberish sometimes to her. But I also try to talk real talk, to use real language as much as possible. There's still a voice that we use, that high sing-songy voice. It's called parentese, that babies tend to tune into more. But speaking real language and parentese accelerates the rate at which they will start to catch on and understand what you're talking about, to be able to use language themselves. Now, they'll understand some words long before they can speak or say words. And part of the ways they come to understand words is through pointing. So we have talk, sing, and point. If you point at what you're talking to, what you're referring to, the baby will, after a while, see the pattern. Every time mommy says no, she's pointing to that thing in the middle of her face. And every time she says bottle, she's pointing to that thing I drink my milk from. Okay, so you get the idea. And singing is almost like parentese. It's another voice that the kids can tune into. Plus, it teaches rhythm. And so you get a sense of rhythm, you hear real language. So talk, sing, and point are all about language acquisition and support for the language acquisition process. Count, group, and compare are about supporting that part of the brain that deals with numeracy, that lays the foundation for mathematics and even STEM skills, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics skills later in life. And there's a few, the most interesting fact to me about STEM skills is that if you play grouping games with a toddler, take 4 to 10 objects and just regroup them and name the numbers. So 8 and 2, 5 and 5, 3 and 7, 1 and 9, and just name the numbers in each group. After a while, children will catch on to the fact that those number words are not just words you say after one another. 5 is not just the number you always say after 4 and before 6. 5 is actually 5 of something. And again, every little intellectual breakthrough like that makes the world make more sense. And we scaffold learning on top of learning. So children that catch on early to these ideas get a bigger and bigger head start on other kids, because they can use what they know to make sense of what they're learning. And the idea is we want to give all children access to those experiences that will help them to keep up with their peers. The fourth of the principles is explore through movement and play. And the point here is to have parents understand that playtime is exploration and discovery time. A lot of us think, oh, the kids are just playing, we can ignore it, it's not much going on, it's just it's nothing's happening productive during playtime. It's sort of our intuition. Well, a lot is happening productive during playtime. Kids are trying to figure things out. They're learning by trial and error. And so if the parent decides to tune in to play, the parent can be a learning partner in this. The parent can let the child know that their curiosity is welcome, that the parent welcomes the opportunity to be engaged. It's interesting that parents also need to know when to stand back and not interfere, because sometimes you'll see a child who's just focused, trying to figure something out, and they're making a little bit of progress. You can see they're kind of working it through. As long as they're making progress, they're learning what it feels like to figure things out. And so if the parent watches and intervenes just enough to help get past any major points of confusion, but not every point of confusion, because obviously that discovery moment for the child is also important. If the parent engages in a really balanced and purposeful way, that is helping to produce a thinker. It's helping to produce a child who develops what we call a mastery orientation, a growth mindset toward their learning. And finally, the fifth of the principles is read and discuss stories. Now, it turns out that when we're talking about infants and toddlers, kids that are birth to 3 years old, it's almost misleading to tell them that reading is important, because it's not really the reading. The child doesn't know if you're reading or not. It's really the story. It's telling a story. It's having a warm, fuzzy encounter while you're sitting together reading the book. It's speaking with expression, pointing at the bright colors, engaging the child to reflect and give you their point of view if they have one. So as soon as the child is able to react at all to what they're seeing on the page, to elicit their reactions, right? And so it's about laying the foundation for a life of reading, helping the child to learn that book time is really enjoyable time. And it's something they can do with their parents that builds a relationship, that builds their language skills. So lots of different developmental benefits that come from that. But it's the read and discuss. And I should also point out that while we are focused on ages 0 to 3, these 5 basics never stop mattering, these 5 basics principles. Okay, we over the next several months are also going to be adding some materials for ages 3 to 5. So for some things like our text messaging, we'll hope to be able to go from birth to kindergarten, to the start of kindergarten, or at least to the 5th birthday initially on this. So those are the basics, 5 principles. I'm going to keep going now. The idea is I mentioned earlier that we wanted to do something that could go to scale. That wouldn't just be one program that serves a few kids in one location. So the idea is to do this as a community level public health intervention, where we reach parents through all the different places that they already interact with trusted messengers. They already go to the doctor. A lot of people go to the library. They go to church and to work, and they might live in a housing development. Their older kids are in schools. All these are places where they interact with people that they already kind of know and trust, from whom they're willing to accept some new information, some encouragement. And so we're trying to develop approaches such that for each of these sectors, there are ways to integrate communication about the basics into the normal interactions. And there are really 3 things we want to give. One is just information. The second is social reinforcement. And the third is reminders or nudges, right? We want people to have access to the information. We want them to be reinforced through their relationships with people they respect and care about, and want to get them some reminders so they don't forget to do it. People can see something and say, oh, that'd be a great idea. I'm going to do that. And they don't ever think about it again. And so all 3 of those pieces are part of what we want parents to experience.
Now I know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sing with me?
Learning begins the moment your child is born.
Baby, baby, baby.
Do you want to play too?
Every child is filled with vast potential for success in life. And those first 3 years can have the greatest impact on your child's learning.
Go here. Hit the wheels. We're gonna push this, and then they all spin. Ooh.
Wow, awesome job.
It's all about giving a child a proper start. That's what being a parent is all about.
Lo estás haciendo, amor, lo haces.
I wanted to make sure that I was here every day. Such a joy.
Every parent of every background can make a positive difference in their child's life.
It's peeling. Boom.
A few simple, everyday activities can make a big difference. That's why The Basics is working with research and community leaders to promote an important new initiative.
2. Good job. 3.
The Basics are 5 simple principles that we want everyone to know. The first of the basics is to maximize love and manage stress. The second is to talk, sing, and point.
Let's take a bath.
A lovely bubbly bath.
The third is to count, group, and compare.
1, 2, 3.
The fourth is to encourage and enable movement in space and play. And the fifth is to read, but not just to read. We want to read and discuss stories.
Whoa, what is that? A duck. What does the duck sound like?
These are the 5 fun and simple things that every parent can do beginning from birth.
Can you stack it? Orange and a yellow.
Let's all work together to make sure our children can become the best, most well-prepared they can possibly be.
Maximize love.
And manage stress.
Talk, sing,
And point.
Count, group,
Y compare.
Explore through
movement, and play.
read.
And discuss stories. Please join us and help spread the word.
Okay, so in terms of the parents' experience, we've talked about having 4 strategic gears in the work. The first is smartphone messaging. So we have text messaging where it's twice a week, and we're going to have an app before too long where more than twice a week potentially. Parents get messages on their phones that give them information and inspiration about the basics principles. The Monday message is a fact. When parents sign up, they put the baby's birth date in, so the messages are calibrated to fit the child's age and level of maturation. So it's a fact on Monday, and the Wednesday message is try this, is an activity, one of our activity ideas. And so every week for 3 years, and potentially for up to 5 years after we had a couple more years here, every week they're getting these messages of information about what's happening developmentally with their child and things that they can do with their child. Second is video and print materials. We have an online toolkit for parents. thebasics.org, up in the upper left-hand corner, this thing says for parents and caregivers. People click on that. There's a video for each of the 5 basics principles, and there's a whole carousel of ideas and tips for things people can do. And it's separated for infants ages birth to 12 months and toddlers ages 12 months to 3 years. Same kinds of information that we find in the app, in the text messaging, but the text messages actually delivers it to your cell phone, so people don't have to go online to look at it. But if they want more ideas than are available this week or that they've gotten so far on their text messages, they can go up to the toolkit and get way more than they want from there. And so video and print materials. We also have a toolkit for frontline practitioners, for community-based organizations in all those sectors that have handouts that they can use with the parents they serve, and activity guides that they can use when they're working with parents on these things. Then we have the positive reinforcements. And increasingly, the work is starting to become really focused and organized around the text messages, because if people are getting those informational messages every week, then when they go to their pediatrician, the pediatrician doesn't have to try to explain a lot about count, group, and compare, or explore through movement, play, or maximize love, manage stress. The pediatrician can say, what message did you get this week? Did you use it? How'd your child react? Are you still doing ones from last week? Do you enjoy it? And just have it, and then encouraging. It's really important to do those things. And if you do those things, you're actually going to help determine how smart your baby's going to be and how easy it's going to be to learn in their whole life trajectory. So it's really important to do these things. So the social reinforcement can be reinforcement primarily, instead of teaching the core information if people are receiving the text messages, because that's where they can get a lot of the core information. But imagine if those social reinforcements don't just come from the pediatrician, they come from the minister and the activity leader in the housing development and the kindergarten teacher for your kid's older child and your employer at work and the sign on the side of the bus or just, every place around the community, you're running into these reinforcements for using these ideas. And those are all the reminders. And then finally, opportunities for parents to lead. Increasingly, communities that are affiliated with our work are finding ways to prepare parents to reach out and engage other parents, to have other parents sign up for the messaging, to give other parents a pat on the back or reminder about how important it is to use these principles. And so a fully blown, fully developed version of what we're doing would be a community where parents almost can't escape the basics. As they move from one organization to another, they keep running into reminders. They keep running into people who are giving them a pat on the back and encouragement. They keep running into opportunities to engage and to help serve other parents. As I say that, I'm remembering a video that we did recently in East Boston. They have a group called the Parent Champions, and we interviewed, or at least I didn't do the interview, some folks interviewed, and we have it on video. And one of the mothers she said, I just love it so much because it gives me a chance to help other parents help their kids. Okay. I mean, most of us do the work we do because we find it fulfilling to help other people. Okay. That's part of what gives our life meaning, the opportunity to help other people. And part of this is about giving parents who may not have a lot of opportunities to feel that, that they're making a huge contribution to the world, giving them the opportunity to share with and reinforce with other parents is another contribution. I mean, I'm reminded, often we'll ask people to do things. We're worried that they're going to feel, oh, you're putting a burden on me. People will often be just so happy that we asked them to do it, that we invited them and gave them an opportunity to serve. And so that's a lot about these 4 strategic gears that reinforce one another and all help that family to help their child. The Basics Insights text messages, I've already talked a little bit about. They come twice a week. The fact and a try this, and they're lined with key frameworks like the Head Start Early Learning Outcomes Framework, and because we're all drawing on the same body of science for early childhood development. And it's really about packaging that science and delivering it in user-friendly ways so that people can really embed it in their everyday life routines. It's, as it says here, intended to support conversations and so on. And that's kind of what it looks like on the screen. This is a video of a father. It's I think it's 1 minute and 20 seconds of a father talking about the messages.
My name is Rossi Chow. The baby, he's 11 months.
So could you tell us how you first heard about Basics Insights?
Well, I heard through Dr. Eva when he has his 1 month appointment, and she asked if I was interested. I said, yeah, I'll take a look at it. From the first text on to now, I loved it ever since, and it's something new that, new parents need be great to get, and I would refer it to new parents. I'm a 3-time dad now, and I still find stuff that's interesting that I never knew that, oh, wow. I never knew that he was able to do that at that month or that age. It got me more active with him because I didn't know some of the stuff. I actually showed the text that I received early in the morning. I showed to a coworker of mine whose son just had a son. So he said, you should sign up what Ross signed up. And it's great. He's a 50-something-year-old grandfather. He's like, oh, I didn't know about this either. Grandmother, grandfather, I would recommend this to anybody and share with other people as well.
Okay, we have some surveys built into the text messaging stream so we get some feedback on parents' experience. One of the most interesting findings here is that 72% agree that they have talked about the messages with a friend or relative. So that's saying this is not only affecting the thinking of the person who's getting the messages, they're talking to other people who care for their child. Or like Rossi, you just saw, he told his coworker about it and told his coworker he should get his son, who just had a new grandchild, to sign up. So the messages start to spread out through the family and through the community. Other things, 98% either agree or strongly agree, they'd recommend. Agree here means agree or totally agree. Messages keep them thinking about how to help their child learn. That's 84% totally agree, the highest level on that one. That the messages keep them thinking about how to help their kids learn. 84% say they use all or most of the messages. And the biggest impacts are on the people who need it most. In our analyzing the data, we can identify the quartile, the 25% of families who are lowest on reporting that they do these kinds of things with their kids. We ask about, how often you play on the floor with your child, talk about feelings, talk about numbers, or count things. The families who are least likely to be doing that at baseline are the ones that experience the biggest increases by 3.5 months later. They're also the families who at baseline where the parents are least likely to agree that they are the types of people who plan for the future. So one statement is, I'm the type of person who plans for the future. And there are various different levels of agreement with that. I'm the type of person who keeps trying and doesn't give up when things become difficult. The people who are least future oriented and least persistent at baseline are also the ones that tend to not be interacting with their kids that much. And they're the ones that experience the biggest increases over the first 3.5 months in interacting with their kids. They don't quite catch up with the others, but they close the gap a lot. And that's where you get the biggest bang for your time and energy there. This just shows the different places where we have affiliated communities. If this was totally up to date, there'd be a lot more little red dots down there in Georgia, because we've had recent growth in Georgia. And so there's a poem that I tend to end with. I think I'll maybe read that poem now, and then we'll have 15 minutes or so to have some interaction, some conversation. The poem is called The Caregiver's Promise, and it's written from the perspective of the parent of a newborn. And you'll see as I go through, you'll see reflections of those 5 basic principles. With my heart, I will love you and shield you from stress. With my mouth, I will speak what I feel. With soft words and sweet songs, every time I behold you, I'll show you that my love is real. With my fingers, I'll point at the objects I name, and I'll count them in groups to compare. With my feet, I will take you outdoors to explore while we play and enjoy the fresh air. With my eyes, I will read as I show you the world through bright pictures and stories and books. These are ways to make sure that your brain is prepared for successes wherever you look. This is my promise I make from the day of your birth, that these basics I'll faithfully do. For my job is to help you grow happy and smart, starting now, when your life is brand new. You will learn that your life is an artwork and that you are the artist in charge. But before you decide what to do with your life, listen now to the beat of my heart. So I will stop with that. I'm going to unshare my screen and hope we can have a little bit of conversation.
Wonderful, Dr. Ferguson. Thank you so much. We do have a question. So this question came from Grace. Exactly what can be scaled up and tailored for children's needs after age 3?
What can be scaled up and tailored for children's needs after age 3? Well, if we establish a culture in our community where people are looking for opportunities to provide positive reinforcement to families, and those 3 things I mentioned, the information, social reinforcement, and reminders, the basics don't stop being relevant, right? And so still reminding people to love their kids and to shield their kids from stress, to talk to their kids, to have the back and forth serve and return interaction, to play number games, to watch their kids play and engage their kids during play, to read and discuss stories. And if we have reinforcements around the community, signs around the community, I think we're still getting that feedback that we were getting, the background noise, thanks. If we have all those reinforcements around the community, the fact that right now our materials are officially or formally only through age 3, does not stop you from continuing that on. It should be part of the community culture. And frankly, over time, we want to add the materials as we go to higher and higher age ranges, but we can't do everything at once. We got to start someplace, and we've started with birth to 3. So again, I mean, I should also plug my book. I have a book called The Formula, Unlocking the Secrets to Raising Highly Successful Children. Again, The Formula, Unlocking Secrets to Raising Highly Successful Children is co-authored with Tasha Robertson. And we there go from birth to early adulthood. We interviewed a couple hundred super successful people, often interviewed their parents, and we found a pattern in their parenting behaviors. During the preschool years, the birth to 5, it's basically the basics. It's like the basics on steroids. It's a period that where we talk about the parent role as being the early learning partner. A parent who spends a lot of time with their children doing things that the children experience as fun, but that are where they're learning and they're developing an identity as a learner. I'm the kind of person who just likes learning. So when they show up at kindergarten, just one more adult to learn with. They're used to learning with adults, right? But then what we have is the flight engineer, and the flight engineer monitors to be sure that the school does a good job. And the fixer makes sure that the kid finds opportunities to find enrichment in their interest. The revealer makes sure the kids have access to have exposure to all kinds of things that they could be and do when they grow up. They find passion projects. So it's really about exposure. That's the revealer. The philosopher talks to kids about life's big questions, helps them find a sense of purpose and ethical compass. The model carries himself in a way that the kid wants to emulate. Oh, I want to be like my mom. I want to be like my dad. The negotiator teaches the child to self-advocate, to speak truth to power respectfully, to behave in ways that powerful people want to support them. And then the GPS navigational voice is the parent's voice in the child's head, bringing back all those lessons at just the right times to help children make decisions once they're away from their family. And so while the basics is those very early years, the formula takes us all the way up into adulthood. And the two together are a nice mix. So.
Dr. Ferguson, I love the way you have that analogy and those connections that you're making just through the interactions. We also have another question. How do you join the network?
Well, in Georgia right now, it's I think a good idea to get back in touch with the Deal Center. There are 11 communities now in Georgia that are part of the network. We're calling it the Basics Learning Network of Georgia. And if you put your email address in the chat stream, then that will get passed on to folks at the Deal Center who can help to bring you into that mix. And I work with them, and we can put it together from there. But we welcome new communities to become engaged. We want to reach as many parents and as many children as we can to give them the benefit of what we've learned.
Okay, I was typing in a response to that question. Another question we have is, what's your vision for the basics? I know this came from Miss Helena. I know you have started organically, started organically. Do you see scaling happening within BLN? What is engaging more communities? So, excuse me, that is in engaging more communities.
Yeah, thanks. BLN stands for the Basics Learning Network. We have a network of 40 to 50 communities, depending upon exactly how you count, around the country, and actually some outside the country, in Brazil and Australia, where communities have brought the basics framework and the basics ideas into their communities to do the kinds of things that I've talked about here. So far, we have not done active outreach to invite communities in. I mean, I give talks and I talk about it, but typically it's a community that will call us and say, "We heard about you. Hey, can we play too?" And we say, sure. But the aspiration is to really have an international network of communities that are using these ideas and where there's a lot of cross-fertilization and sharing of ideas and learning together, and it just becomes part of the culture. Right now, a lot of the ideas that I talk about when it comes to implementation are ideas that have come back to me from participating communities. And increasingly, we're having people who are out in the participating communities step up and have ideas about how they can contribute, how they can kind of add to the sum total of what we are. And so right now we have, for the point people in participating districts, we have a monthly webinar. We've been having an annual conference. We're doing a virtual conference this year, but we will, I think, more and more have affinity groups where people who are in the same sector will be able to come together periodically to compare notes. So I'm in the healthcare sector, or in the faith-based sector, or in the library sector. Affinity groups where they compare notes, where we have inventories of examples. People can watch videos of how people in their sector are doing the basics. Various ways of measuring and tracking progress so you can document your impacts to inspire local funders to want to continue to support the work. And also ultimately starting to add ages on. So right now we started at 0 to 3. We're in the process of just starting to add 3 to 5. Next step will probably be 5 to 8, then 8 to 14, and 14 to 18, and we might stop with that. But the idea is you have really a reservoir of resources that communities can use to reach parents, and also setting it up so some of the information we push out goes directly to parents and doesn't depend on a frontline service provider having the time and energy to explain it, but giving parents direct access. And so they get information directly, they can get it through their pediatrician, and it's all wrapped up in a community culture where there are celebrations even. You can imagine that twice a year, there is some recognition of a community-based organization that's done the most impressive work on engaging families with the basics, right? We talk about, we do Thanksgiving the same way every year almost, okay? There's certain ideas, there are rituals we have. We come back to those rituals, and building rituals, community level rituals around the basics is among the things we can do. So we really want to institutionalize it. It's not a program that has a fixed beginning and ending. Our materials fit into programs. They can be infused into existing programs to enrich and strengthen those programs. It's really a movement, the basics movement. We say you have a movement when you have a lot of people who have the same sense of urgency and a sense of possibility. They have an urgency to address an issue, but a sense of possibility that if we step up together, we can really make a difference on this issue. And so we have several little different phrases. We have the basics principles. We have the basics strategy, which is the general approach. We have the basics movement. And the basics movement is all those people who want to implement the basic strategy to make sure parents apply the basics principles through basics related practices in their daily routine interactions with their children. And so it's just to reinforce that again, there's a vision here. It's a movement. It's about changing the collective culture of early childhood caregiving, and ultimately of childhood caregiving on up through the years. And I think there are enough of us who feel that commitment to do it, and we just need structures like this through which to bring together that collective energy so we can make these things happen.
So, Dr. Ferguson, I really admire the way that you all are going about just meeting parents where they are. You know, you're not waiting for them to seek and find and look for the information. You're bringing it into their community, dropping it at their doorstep, and, you know, capturing their attention in their everyday, daily engagements, practices, things that they have to engage in. You're providing and making that information available at that level. So it's extremely commendable. So we thank you.
Well, we invite you to stay part of the movement too.
Oh, for sure. We have a question, or maybe this is just a statement from Zoe. She says, as a new partner with the network, we find the basics to be a natural support and reinforcement for our Get Georgia Reading campaign also. So
Great.
it's very amenable.
What community is Zoe from? Is it what community is Zoe? I don't know if it's Zoe or Zoe. It's pronounced.
What community is Zoe?
What, Zoe? Do you want to unmute yourself and just say where you are? Cook County. Okay. All right. Oh, that's actually people can't unmute themselves, can they? All right. Or maybe they can now.
No, folks cannot unmute themselves.
Okay. Good. Well, great to have everybody here. Thanks, Zoe, for contributing.
Cook County Family Connection.
I just want to say thank you to Grace and Helena for being here and having your screens on so I can see in the spirit. Yeah. Helena, your dog looks almost like a stuffed animal. So fluffy.
Well, Dr. Ferguson, I will at this time just say thank you so much for such an informative session, providing us with the basics in terms of the 5 principles. And then one piece that really, really caught my attention, and probably that of others, is that these principles and strategies are wrapped around the 5 principles is really an evidence-based practice.
Yes.
And then I love the idea of this collective intentionality, because when you look at the principles, it's like common sense, kind of things parents do, caregivers kind of already do, but now being very intentional because you understand the impact behind engaging in these principles and practices with young children. So I'm so excited because it's just, it feels like something that people feel like, I can do that.
Yes.
I can do it. Just tell me what I need to do. It's not impractical. It's very practical and applicable. So I truly, truly thank you for just developing this and structuring it in a way that we can share it with communities and families. Very excited. Thank you.
I welcome anybody who wants to be involved, encourage you to be involved, and look forward to working together.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining the session. I hope you found some major components that you want to take back and share. I hope you're excited and energized by this information and that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.